Imagine standing on stage, holding your diploma, scanning the crowd for your parents, and realizing they're at a Super Bowl party instead. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name's Laura Quinn, I'm 23, and I grew up in a small town in Oregon. Last year, I graduated from college, the first in my family to ever do it. I worked 2 jobs through school, survived off instant noodles, and pushed myself harder than I thought I could. Graduation day was supposed to be my reward, the moment my parents finally looked at me and said, "We're proud of you." For weeks, I'd been reminding them about the date. I sent emails, texted reminders, even mailed them the invitation because my mom likes physical things. They always said, "We'll try to make it, honey." That try should have been my first warning sign. The morning of my graduation, I called my mom. She didn't pick up. My dad texted, "Busy day, kiddo. We'll celebrate soon." I thought maybe they were getting ready, or maybe running late. But when I walked onto that stage and looked out at the sea of faces, parents cheering, siblings holding signs, families crying, there was no one there for me. Just an empty row where my parents should have been. After the ceremony, my friends were taking pictures with their families. I stood alone, holding my diploma like it meant nothing. I tried to smile for the camera when one of my classmates offered to take a photo for me, but my chest felt hollow. When I got back to my apartment that night, I opened my phone and scrolled through social media. That's when I saw it, a photo my mom had posted earlier that day. My parents were at a Super Bowl party, laughing with friends, wearing matching jerseys, holding drinks. The caption said, "Nothing beats family and football." I remember staring at the screen for a long time. My stomach sank, and it wasn't just disappointment, it was something colder. They hadn't even texted me congratulations. Not even a quick, "We're proud of you." I wasn't worth missing a game for. That night, I cried, the kind of crying that leaves your face hot and your throat sore. I kept asking myself why they didn't care enough. I'd done everything right. I stayed out of trouble, worked hard, and made something of myself. But to them, it was never enough. That's the night something inside me changed. I decided that if my parents couldn't be proud of me, I'd stop begging. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first step toward the revenge they'd never see coming. They skipped my biggest day for a football game. But soon, they'd learn what it felt like to be left behind, just like they did to me. I grew up in a house where effort never seemed to count. My parents, Rick and Dana Quinn, believed in getting by, not reaching higher. My dad worked long shifts as a mechanic, and my mom managed a small grocery store. We never had much, but somehow there was always enough for what they wanted. New fishing gear for dad, wine nights for mom, just not for things that mattered to me. When I told them I wanted to go to college, they laughed like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. My dad said, "College doesn't pay bills, Laura. Get a job that does." My mom added, "You're not better than the rest of US. Don't start acting like it." I learned early that ambition wasn't welcome in our house. Still, I went. I applied for scholarships, took out loans, and waited tables at night just to keep the lights on. Every paycheck disappeared into tuition, rent, and books. Sometimes, I'd send a little money home when my parents said they were tight again. They always took it, never said thank you, and acted like it was my duty. During college, while other students had family cheering them on, I was alone. I remember studying in the library until 2 a.m., my hands shaking from too much coffee, my mind foggy from exhaustion. I'd get a text from my mom saying, "Your brother needs new shoes, can you help?" There was never a, "How are you doing?" or "We're proud of you." Just needs, never gratitude. I missed holidays to work shifts, skipped parties to study, and lived off peanut butter sandwiches when money ran out. I'd see my classmates' parents visiting campus with care packages and I never got that. My parents only came when they needed something signed or paid for. One winter break, I came home after finals, thinking maybe things would feel different. Instead, my dad complained about how college kids think they're too good for real work. I offered to fix his old laptop, and he joked, "Guess that's what all that fancy education's for." I laughed it off, but inside I was tired of being the joke in my own family. The harder I worked, the less they respected me. I started to understand that my success made them uncomfortable. It reminded them of what they'd never tried to be. I wasn't trying to outgrow them, I just wanted them to see me. But to them, I was still the kid who should stay humble and be practical. Every achievement I reached felt smaller around them. When I got into my program's honors list, they said, "That's nice, but when are you getting a real job?" When I paid off part of my loans, my mom joked, "You should teach us how to be rich." Nothing was ever sincere. By the time graduation came, I didn't expect them to cheer loudly or bring flowers. I just hoped they'd show up. I thought maybe, for once, they'd see what I'd been fighting for, not to escape them, but to prove I could stand on my own. But even that hope was too much to ask. That evening, after the long drive back to my apartment, The silence felt heavier than usual. My gown hung over the chair, wrinkled and useless now. I sat on my bed, still wearing the medal my professor had placed around my neck, and stared at my phone. No messages, no calls, nothing. I told myself maybe they were busy, maybe something came up. But deep down I knew better. Curiosity and dread pushed me to open my phone. The first thing that appeared on my screen was a photo that stopped my breath. My parents were standing in someone's backyard, smiling wide under strings of lights. They wore matching blue jerseys, drinks in hand, surrounded by a crowd cheering around a TV screen. A Super Bowl banner hung behind them. The caption said, "Best night with the best people." My chest tightened. The timestamp showed it had been posted right before my ceremony started. While I was walking across that stage, they were raising glasses. My throat went dry, and for a second I couldn't even blink. The laughter in that photo felt like a slap. They hadn't forgotten. They'd chosen not to come. I scrolled through more pictures. My dad with his arm around a friend, my mom dancing with a beer in hand, trays of food lined up on a table. It wasn't just a party. It looked like the highlight of their year. My phone buzzed, and for a heartbeat, I thought maybe it was them. But it was my little brother, Cole. "Hey Lar, saw your graduation pics online. Looked cool," he said casually. His voice was cheerful, unaware of the ache in mine. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound normal. "Did Mom and Dad tell you why they didn't come?" He laughed softly. "They had that big Super Bowl thing at the Petersons. Dad said he couldn't bail last minute. You know how he is about football." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The way Cole said it, so ordinary, so casual, made it worse. Like my graduation had been nothing more than an event they'd skip without guilt. "Oh," I managed. "Yeah, I guess I do know." Cole kept talking about the game, how loud it got, how much fun everyone had. I murmured short replies, pretending to listen, feeling my heart sink deeper with each word. When we hung up, I sat there in the dim light of my room, the sound of cheering echoing faintly in my mind. I opened the photo again. My parents' smiles looked so effortless, so full of joy, joy that had nothing to do with me. The anger didn't come in a burst. It crept in slow, sharp, and quiet. I wasn't sad anymore. I was done being hurt. Something colder replaced it, something steady and deliberate. That night, I stopped waiting for them to care. I stopped making excuses. Love shouldn't feel like begging for attention, and family shouldn't make you feel small. They'd made their choice that day, and I silently made mine. A few days later, I drove back home, hoping to hear some kind of apology. The closer I got to the old house, the smaller I felt. The porch light was on, the same one I'd left on during high school nights, waiting for them to notice I'd stayed up studying. Inside, everything looked the same, cluttered, loud, and a little too bright. My mom was in the kitchen stirring something in a pot, and my dad sat on the couch watching sports highlight. "Hey, there's the college grad," my dad said without looking away from the TV. His tone was cheerful, careless. My mom smiled over her shoulder. "We saw the photos online. Looked nice. That's all." I asked, my voice tighter than I wanted. "You didn't think missing it was a big deal?" My mom sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. "Lara, it's just a ceremony. You already got your degree, didn't you? We had plans that night, and your dad couldn't cancel. Everyone was counting on us to bring the wings." I stared at her, trying to understand how she could say that so easily. It wasn't just a ceremony to me. I worked for that moment. I wanted you there. My dad muted the TV, finally turning his head. "Don't start with the guilt trip. You know how much that game meant to our friends. We didn't do it to hurt you." Something inside me cracked. "You missed the biggest day of my life for a party, Dad. You didn't even text me." He shrugged. "You're overreacting. You know how dramatic you can be." My chest burned. "Dramatic? I spent 4 years killing myself to make you proud, and you couldn't bother to show up." My mom raised her hands. "Lara, don't make everything about yourself. You act like we don't care just because we didn't sit in some auditorium for 3 hours." I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "That's exactly what I'm saying. You never care unless it's convenient for you." The air went still. My dad's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone. We've supported you plenty." "Supported me how?" I snapped. "By taking the money I sent you while I was working nights? By pretending my achievements don't matter? You didn't even call me, Dad. Not once." My mom's face hardened. "You need to stop twisting everything. We've always done our best. Maybe you should be grateful you even had parents to help when you needed them." I stared at her, speechless. They weren't listening. They never did. Every word I said bounced off the same wall of excuses and guilt. "I didn't come here to fight," I said quietly. "I just wanted to hear you say you were sorry." My dad scoffed. "You're not a kid anymore. Grow up, Lara." The last bit of hope I had drained out right then. I turned toward the door without another word. My mom called after me, "Don't leave angry." But I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. And that emptiness was the start of something far colder. A few quiet weeks passed after that argument. I buried myself in my new job, trying to forget the hollow silence that hung between me and my parents. Work kept me busy, and I told myself distance was the best thing. They hadn't reached out since that day, and honestly, I preferred it that way. But one evening, my phone rang. My dad's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer. Something in me hesitated, but habit won. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to sound calm. "Hey, kiddo," he replied, using that same casual tone he always did when he wanted something. "How's the new job treating you?" "It's good," I said carefully. "Busy but good." He chuckled. "That's my girl. Always working hard. Listen, I actually called because your mom and I are in a bit of a bind right now." I leaned back in my chair, already feeling that old familiar twist in my stomach. "What kind of bind?" He cleared his throat. "We had to refinance the house. Some unexpected repairs came up, and your mom's hours got cut. We're a little short on cash until things level out." I didn't say anything. I could already see where this was going. "So," he continued, "I figured since you've got that fancy new job and all, maybe you could lend us a little something. Just a short-term thing. We'll pay you back as soon as we can." My pulse picked up. For a second, I thought maybe I misheard him. They hadn't apologized, hadn't even tried to mend things, and now they were asking for money. I bit the inside of my cheek, forcing myself to stay composed. "How much are you talking about?" I asked flatly. "Oh, nothing crazy," he said quickly. "Just a few thousand to get through the month. You know how tight things can get. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." Important. The word stung. My graduation hadn't been important, but this was. "Did you call Cole?" I asked. "Maybe he can help." He laughed. "Your brother's still figuring his stuff out. You're the one who's stable right now. We're proud of you for that, by the way." Proud. The first time he'd said that word, and it came wrapped around a request for money. "Dad," I said slowly, "you didn't even call me after graduation. Not once." He paused, uncomfortable. "We already went over that, Laura. No need to drag it back up. Family helps family, right?" That line, "family helps family," hit harder than I expected. It sounded more like a demand than a reminder. I swallowed hard. "Let me think about it," I said, my voice even. "Sure thing, sweetheart." "No rush," he said quickly, too relieved. "Just don't wait too long, okay?" When the call ended, I sat in silence, the air thick around me. They'd skipped the most important day of my life, brushed it off like nothing, and now wanted my help. I should have felt anger, but what I felt instead was colder, a quiet, steady resolve forming deep in my chest. If they thought I'd just hand over my hard-earned money without a second thought, they were about to learn that I wasn't the same daughter they could guilt and manipulate anymore. I didn't refuse him outright. I couldn't, not yet. Saying no would have ended the conversation and left me with the hollow satisfaction of a single victory. Instead, I let my voice be easy, the voice I used when I wanted something to go smoothly. "Okay," I told him. "I'll come by this weekend and we'll figure it out." I packed a small casserole and a smile I'd practiced in the mirror. On the drive there, I rehearsed casual lines. Ask about repairs, offer to call a contractor, say I have a lead at work. All of it was camouflage. Inside, my head was a grid of plans. I wanted them to taste what it felt like to be insignificant, but slowly, not cruel for the sake of cruelty, surgical. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and old coffee. Rick greeted me at the door with a hug that felt automatic. Dana's laughter filled the kitchen as she fussed with paper plates. I handed over the dish and sat at the table like a diplomat at a tense summit. Conversation moved in expected circles. Whether, who needs what, my new position, and I answered in short, polite bursts. While they spoke, I scanned the room. A stack of envelopes on the counter. A dog-eared ledger under a coffee mug. The thermostat set low despite the drafty windows. Small, ordinary things that hinted at where money went and how it didn't stretch. When Rick left to grab a tool, I opened a drawer and found receipts. An appliance repair, a small loan notice, a statement from the refinancing company. I didn't take pictures or shout. I folded the papers back in place and made a mental map. I volunteered to help with the budget. "Let me look over your numbers," I said, and they gratefully handed me a spiral note. They wanted rescue, and I would act like their savior. I added rows on my phone, typed figures into a spreadsheet app, suggested trimming cable or comparing insurance rate. They nodded, relieved, visibly softened by my attention. Dana reached for my hand and squeezed it, the gesture confusing and familiar all at once. Over the next few visits, I performed small kindnesses on a loop. I fixed a flickering lamp. I sat through a rambling weekend football rerun to keep Rick company. I drove Dana to a supply store and offered to pick up groceries. Each favor was a probe. I watched how they thanked me, how their tone shifted from obligation to entitlement. I noticed the way Rick mentioned his mates, as if their plans outweighed other commitments. I learned the rhythm of their excuses. At night, back in my apartment, I laid out what I'd observed. I traced their spending, marked dates when bills arrived, and circled patterns of reliance. The plan that formed wasn't loud. It didn't need fireworks. It required patience, timing, and exactness. I wanted them to confront absence and uncertainty in the same quiet way I had been forced to. Not for spectacle, but to calibrate a lesson they couldn't shrug off. I told myself this wasn't about revenge in the mean sense. It was about teaching them boundaries, about reclaiming the ground they'd always expected to walk on as their own. I pictured conversations where they realized their requests would no longer be automatic. I imagined the look on Rick's face when a favor had to be earned instead of taken. When I came home that night, I felt calmer than I had in months. The anger had sharpened into strategy. I was no longer pleading for recognition. I was arranging the terms by which I would be involved. Waiting would be part of it. Patience, not forgiveness, would be my ally. Not long after those visits, my parents came up with what they called their big plan. Over dinner one evening, my dad leaned forward, eyes bright with that old spark he got whenever he thought he'd found an easy way out of a problem. "We've been talking," he began, "thinking about starting something of our own. A little home renovation business. People around town always need fixing and painting done. Might as well make it official." My mom nodded eagerly beside him. "Your dad's great with tools, and I've got the people skills. We just need a little help getting started. Paperwork, budgeting, that sort of thing. You're good with all that computer stuff, right, honey?" I smiled, polite and calm. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to help." Inside, though, I was already outlining what this could become. They thought they were pulling me into another favor, another round of unpaid labor. But this time, I would be the one keeping score. Over the next few weeks, I sat at their kitchen table with spreadsheets open and a pen tucked behind my ear. They handed me folders of receipts, business cards, and half-written notes. My dad explained his vision, flipping old homes, doing small remodels, maybe even expanding into rental properties one day. It sounded ambitious, but beneath the surface, it was disorganized chaos. I listened, taking careful notes. I created organized budgets, listed every expense, and tracked their estimates. My mom fussed over potential logos and slogans while I quietly documented every number they mentioned. They didn't realize that I was keeping copies of everything. Sometimes, while my dad bragged about how much they'd finally make once things took off, I'd catch my mom glancing at me, proud in a strange, possessive way. "You see," she'd say, "we always knew you'd be useful with all that education." The words were meant as praise, but they carried the same sting they always had. I was a tool, not a person. Each night after I left, I'd go home and back up every file. I started keeping a journal of our meetings, logging dates, amounts, and the subtle ways they pushed guilt into every conversation. It was always the same pattern. They'd praise me just enough to keep me hooked, then twist it into obligation. "You're so good at this," my dad would say. "If this thing takes off, it'll be thanks to you." And then, a few breaths later, "But remember, family means we all pitch in. We can't afford to hire anyone yet." I'd nod, smile, and keep typing. I never argued. That was part of the plan. Let them believe they still held the power. They wanted to use my name to help open a small business account, just to get started faster. I agreed, but quietly ensured every signature and authorization passed through me first. I read every line of every form, highlighting clauses and noting details they didn't bother to notice. They thought I was naive, the same daughter who once handed over her last paycheck without hesitation. But while they dreamed about easy money, I was preparing something else, a clean, legal, traceable record of how they operate. Every lie, every manipulation, every casual guilt trip went into that file. The more I watched them, the clearer it became. They hadn't changed. They were still the same people who believed they could take from me without consequence. This time, though, I wasn't going to let them walk away untouched. I'd help them build their dream on paper. Then I'd make sure they were the only ones left holding it when it all came crashing down. The paper I found on the kitchen table didn't look dangerous at first. A single form, creased in green, with a bank logo I didn't recognize. My name was printed across the top. My stomach dropped slow and heavy. For a moment I sat frozen, the whole house humming around me like it was fine, like everything they did was fine. Then I read the fine print and the numbers and the words that made my hands go cold. Loan application, personal guarantee, credit check authorization. They'd tried to use me as collateral without telling me. They'd assumed I'd sign anything, hand over my credit like I'd done every invisible favor before. I folded the paper carefully and carried it to my car. Outside, the air felt sharp enough to cut through whatever numbness had settled in my chest. At the bank, I didn't shout. I explained in a steady voice that my identity was being used without consent. The teller brought me to a quiet office where a manager listened, eyebrow raised but attentive. I filed a fraud report, signed an affidavit, and requested a temporary freeze on my credit. They handed me copies of everything I submitted and wrote down the names of the people they'd need to contact. It felt procedural, clean, efficient, like setting a trap that waited for their next step. Back home, I called the small lender myself before they could. I spoke plainly, stating I would not authorize any lines tied to my Social Security, that any attempt to draw on my credit would be met with legal action. I left no room for negotiation. They paused, then said the word that loosened something inside me: application denied. No loan, no advance, no breathing room for a project built on other people's promises. When Dana showed me the bank statement a week later, she did it like she was proud, like she'd pulled a sudden victory. Rick paced, muttering about missed opportunities. They did not expect pushback. They did not expect consequence. The business plan they'd sketched over cheap coffee and big talk unraveled quickly without the funds they'd counted on. Contractors called. Supplies that had been ordered were returned. A handyman they'd promised work to canceled. I watched the way their shoulders dipped as their house of next steps collapsed into the small, quiet ruin of reality. They confronted me more out of embarrassment than fury. Dana's voice trembled at first, then hardened. "Why would you do that?" she accused. "We asked you for help. We thought you'd have our backs." Rick jabbed a finger in my direction, as if I'd stabbed them. "You ruined everything." I stood in their doorway and kept my palms still. All that pent-up pleading and apology I'd wanted to hear over the years was gone from me. In its place was something sharper. The realization that favors are not a one-way street, that respect cannot be bought by silence. "You asked me to bail you out," I said, my tone even, not loud but not small. "You treated my milestones like inconveniences and expected me to fix your messes in return. I'm done being the automatic solution to problems you created." Dana opened her mouth, probably to call me ungrateful, but Rick cut her off, sputtering about legality and family obligations. Their anger had an edge of panic now, the sound of plans disintegrating under scrutiny. I met Rick's eyes and let the sentence land carefully, without flourish and without glee. "Now you know what it feels like to count on someone who just doesn't show up." The silence that followed that confrontation didn't last long. Within days, my parents began calling everyone they knew, spinning their own version of what had happened. According to them, I'd sabotaged their business out of jealousy, that I'd turned against family. They painted themselves as victims who'd only tried to give me a chance to be part of something meaningful. Every word they spoke twisted the truth until it barely resembled what had actually taken place. My phone buzzed nonstop for a while. Family, friends, old neighbors, even my aunt trying to understand. I didn't defend myself. Explaining would have meant opening that wound again, and I'd spent too many years letting their stories drown out mine. I let the gossip run its course. Eventually, people stopped asking. Silence was easier for them than believing my parents could be capable of the things they'd done. Rick and Dana sank deeper into denial. My dad blamed the system for rejecting the loan. My mom said I'd been influenced by outsiders. They told Cole I'd ruined their future and turned cold. For a while, he believed them, or wanted to. But then he called me one evening, voice quieter than I'd ever heard. "I saw the papers, Laura," he said. "Your name was on everything. They never told me they used it." I didn't say much. Just let the pause stretch long enough for the truth to settle between us. "I thought you were being selfish," he admitted. "But now I get it. They've been doing this forever, just never on paper." That was the first time anyone in the family had said something real to me in months. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We didn't need to. It was enough to have someone finally see through the fog. My parents, on the other hand, doubled down. They refused to take responsibility, blaming stress, bad luck, everyone but themselves. I stopped answering their calls. The last voicemail my mom left ended with a shaky voice saying, "You'll regret shutting us out." But I didn't. Not once. A job offer came around the same time. A position in Seattle that promised stability and a clean start. I accepted it without hesitation. The day I packed my car, the house keys felt lighter in my hand than I expected. I drove through the rain, the highway stretching ahead like a line dividing what was gone and what was left of it. Seattle was gray and loud, but it offered something my old life never had: peace. I rented a small apartment overlooking the water, filled it with secondhand furniture, and learned how to enjoy quiet mornings without guilt. Still, some nights, I'd catch myself thinking about them, not with longing, but with that dull ache that comes from losing something that never truly belonged to you. My revenge hadn't needed shouting or chaos. It had been quiet, precise, and exactly enough. They wanted me to depend on them forever, and now they couldn't reach me at all. I didn't destroy them. They did that on their own. All I did was step out of the way and let the truth finish what it started. Months passed before I heard from them again. Life in Seattle had settled into something simple: quiet mornings, long walks, a rhythm that didn't include phone calls filled with guilt or arguments that looped in circles. The distance had softened the sharp edges of anger, but not the memory. I still carried that part of me like a scar, faint but permanent. One afternoon, when the rain finally stopped, I found a plain white envelope in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front was instantly familiar, my mother's looping cursive, careful and uneven. My hands hesitated before tearing it open. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and nothing else. No return address, no greeting card, just a short letter written in blue ink. Laura, it began. Your father and I have had a rough couple of months. Things didn't work out with the renovation idea, and the bills are piling up again. We're trying to stay afloat, but it's been hard without some extra help. You've always been good with finances. Maybe you could lend us a little to get back on our feet. That was it. No acknowledgement, no apology, no mention of everything that had happened. Just another request. Another reminder that, in their world, my worth still came measured by what I could give. I read the letter twice, slowly, as if the words might change if I looked hard enough. But they didn't. Each line was a quiet echo of the same old pattern. Need disguised as affection, control masquerading as family. I sat there for a long while, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint traffic outside. The loneliness that used to ache so deeply felt different now, lighter, almost clean. I reached for my journal, the one I'd started when everything fell apart. It held years of memories, receipts, notes, scribbled thoughts I'd written to remind myself not to forget who I'd been through it all. I folded the letter neatly and slid it between 2 pages near the back. The paper made a soft sound as it settled, final, almost satisfying. I whispered the words that came without effort, barely louder than a breath. You only get to skip my life once. It wasn't anger that filled me, it was clarity. They would keep reaching for what they thought I owed them, but I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not time, not comfort, not forgiveness. That evening, I sat by the window watching the sky fade from gray to deep blue. City lights flickered against the water, reflections stretching like ribbons. For the first time in years, I felt completely still. I thought about the girl standing alone on that graduation stage, searching the crowd for faces that never looked back. She didn't know then that the silence that day would become her freedom. She had been waiting for someone to show up, but what she really needed was to walk away. The letter remained in the journal, unread again, untouched. Some stories don't end with closure, just a choice not to reopen them. And as the night deepened outside my window, I realized that was enough. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from my parents, or should I have given them another chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.